Welcome to Mishna, study Masechet Hallah, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Vav. Over here in this Mishnah, we're going to discuss different types of baking that's really done with a boiling water. It's Me'isa and Halita, right? So what are they? Me'isa is when you take your flour and you take this flour and you pour it into boiling hot water. And Halita is the opposite, when you take this boiling hot water and you pour it onto your flour. So now the Mishnah is going to discuss these two cases, right? Hamme'isa, right, which we said when you're taking the flour, right, and you're putting it into this boiling hot water, and then you end up kneading it into dough. Bet Shammai potinum, Bet Hillel machavi. Bet Shammai says patur from Hallah, Bet Hillel says hayav. Halita, which is the opposite, when you're taking this boiling water and you're pouring it onto the flour and then you knead the dough. Bet Shammai says the opposite. Bet Shammai is machayev, and Bet Shammai machayvim, Bet Hillel potirim. Right, so it's interesting because it's a very similar, it's a very similar, process. And in one Bet Hillel is mechayev, and the other one Bet Hillel is poter. So the way Yerushalmi actually explains this, and Rambam takes this also, is that the Meisa and Halita are really pretty much almost the same process, and there's no reason Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai should flip opinions over here. And he says there were actually two traditions as to what Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel hold. One person heard that Bet Hillel was mechayev by Me'isa, and he said, okay, the same for Halita. And the other person heard that Bet Hillel was poter by Halita, and he says, oh, it's going to be the same for Me'isa, right? But whichever one Bet Hillel held, if he held Hayav, he would hold Hayav in both the Me'isa and the Halita. What's the halacha? The halacha, by the way, is that Me'isa and Halita. And similarly, anything that's needed with oil or honey or whatever it may be, everything depends on the way it is baked, right? If he's baking it in an oven, right, or even if he's taking a pan, right, and he's pan frying it, or if it's a type of we call type of baking, right? Even if he heats up the pan first, right, he has this pan, he takes it and then he puts the dough inside, right? All that is going to be obligated in halal because that's a type of baking. But let's say he takes the dough and he just lets it, cook out in the sun, right? Like almost like dehydrating it out in the sun. Or if he takes it and he puts it into a liquid, I imagine he takes it and puts it into a soup, right? And he cooks this, these dough balls in a soup, right? Both of those would be patur. Now, Rambam says everything that we mentioned earlier, the sufkenin and the duvshenin, he says, kulam ma'aseh hama, all these are baked in the sun, and that's why they're patur from challah, right? So things items when you're baking bread, if you're baking it in an oven, in a you're in even like a in a pan or any type of, right, really anything in that sense, right? That's going to be obligated in hallah. If you're going to bake it in the sun, or if you're going to cook it, right, in a liquid, in a pot, then it's going to be patur. Now the Mishnah continues, and it speaks about halot toda urkike nazir, right? These are two types of korbanot that you actually need to prepare matzah for. Now, if you're bringing these matzot, right, is halot toda and the urkike nazir, right? By the way, almost all of the korbanot that were brought, anytime we talk about lechem that's brought as a part of a korban, it's always matzah, right? It's always non-chametz, non-leavened bread, right? Except on Shavuot, right? That's the one time when we have the korban shetei lechem, right? So halot todah is a type of matzah. Urkike nazir also matzah they will bring at the culmination of the nazir. So asa'an le'atzmo patur. If you make them for yourself, these are kadosh, right? They're sanctified, and if they're sanctified, they're patur from hallah. But in kor bashuk, let's say you made them and you say, I'm going to make these matzot and I'm going to sell them in the shuk for anyone that needs to bring these korbanot. The person's coming, he needs to bring korban todah, he'll buy them from me, right? And he'll use these for his korban. So over here, it's going to be hayav and hallah, even though technically they're going to be used for kedusha. Because what's the reason? Rambam explains, because if he doesn't sell it, he plans on taking that back home and eating it himself, right? He's not going to, it may not become kadosh, right? And because, right, even though he wants to sell in the shuk, right, Im lo yimkeru yochelemhu, right? If he doesn't sell them, he will eat them himself, and therefore is going to be obligated in hallah. And the machloket, like we explained, Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, is based on the way the Yerushalmi explained, and we explained what the halacha is, right? That any baking process is going to be obligated in hallah.